So to start off, let's just talk about what is cost share. This is just a very simple definition. So essentially what it is, it's the additional costs that a program doesn't cover. So either the funding agency won't cover it, the foundation won't cover it, the cooperative agreement won't cover it. It's any of that additional funding that essentially is just not covered by the incoming award. With that being said, there's actually different types of cost share. So the three I have listed here are the common ones that you will see. So the first one is mandatory. So mandatory cost share is something that's required by the agency. A really fabulous example of this is that the Department of Energy usually has several announcements that requires 20% cost share or 50% cost share. This is something you have to include in your proposal. This is required. The agency wants to see what you're providing, those hard numbers. It has to be quantified in the proposal. And if your institution can't meet those requirements, say the dean only allows 10 or 15% of cost share, then you can't submit the proposal. And that's because you're not meeting those requirements. On the post-award side of things, when you're looking at mandatory cost share, it's something that the institution has to track. We have to report it to the agency. And if your faculty member doesn't spend on their actual project, it also means they're not spending and meeting that cost share commitment, which can be really problematic and sometimes stressful for the departmental research administrator. The next type of cost share is voluntary committed. This is something where the agency is not requiring it, but the faculty member really wants to include it in the proposal and it's been quantified. So in this case, that is, for example, if a faculty member wants to volunteer their time or effort on a proposal, maybe they're asking the institution to provide an institutional commitment. For example, some of my cooperative agreements I have with the centers, we have pilot projects that are funded by institutional commitments by our university. And what really happens with this is since you're writing it into the proposal, there's going to be an expectation for us to track it because now the agency is aware that we are making that commitment to the funding proposal. So again, this puts a little additional burden on the post-award side because now you're having to track additional financial commitments in addition to tracking the finances that are coming in for the project itself. The last type is voluntary uncommitted. You may hear this sometimes be called after the fact cost share. So really what this is the proposal comes in, there's no cost share, nothing's quantified on the proposal. It gets in, it gets awarded, you set the project up, and then your faculty member may come to you and say, oh, well, I want to volunteer 5% of my colleagues' time on the proposal. You can go ahead and have this set up, but since the agency isn't aware of it, there's no holding in terms of that commitment. You're not stressed about having to track, you're not having to worry about making sure that commitments are being met. It's just something that is done after the proposal. It's not really a bigger deal in comparison to your mandatory or your voluntary committed. Another type of cost share that you may see is sometimes called a third-party cost share or an in-kind contribution. Really what that is it may be a industry or a donation that comes in to help with funding the proposal. A lot of times you may see this on an industry contract where someone may be providing, say, some sort of equipment or somebody's time and effort for the project. And the most important thing to know about this is uniform guidance asks for that in-kind cost share to be at fair market rate. So that means for the labor, the parts, the materials, anything that's being provided, it needs to be listed at the fair market rate. Just because it's being provided by somebody else doesn't mean you can't just lowball the expenditures on the project. Next, let's kind of talk about uniform guidance and cost share. So in addition to the agencies having their own definition and viewpoints of cost share and what is allowed and what is required, uniform guidance lays down that federal framework. So really the big thing is voluntary cost share, it's not required. Unless a funding agency specifically is laying it out, it's not required and it's not expected of the institution. It also can't be factored in during merit review. I think this is something that's really important to take note because if you're working on the proposal side of things with a faculty member, I have, in many of my time working with them, they'll come to me and say, oh, but Kathryn, if I include this cost share in my proposal, it's more likely to get funded because it shows that we're covering more of the expenses for this project. That's actually not the case. Uniform guidance clearly states out that during that merit review process, cost share proposals shouldn't be looked at and favored more versus those that can't have that cost share commitments. And like I mentioned before, uniform guidance really talks about when it's considered is when it's having to be included in that proposal because of the awarding agency. Really, what you need to be mindful of is awarding agencies have to list it in their funding opportunity. It can't be something that's brought up later. If it's not stated, it's not listed in black and white on that funding opportunity, then you can come back and push on that. And that is because agencies are expected to be upfront about if there's a cost share commitment. So that way institutions are aware and can prep and plan for cost share.